Hello and welcome to Kirtan London Journey to Joy podcast, episode number 27, with myself, Madhva, your host, and my current co-host and good friend, Acyuta Gopi. She's been with us for a while. She's still with us as we go through chapter 9. We're very, very fortunate to be able to have Acyuta with us for so long, so consistently, sharing her time and sharing her realizations on the Gita. We're in chapter 9, which is apparently one of Acyuta's favorite chapters. It is your favorite chapter.
Yeah, one of them.
One of them. Okay. So one of her favorite chapters. But before we dive into it, we'll start, as we always do, with an invocation prayer or mantra, which is a mantra that we chant, giving thanks to our teachers and asking for their blessings as we are about to start what we might consider a spiritual activity, discussing spiritual books and trying to go deeper. So Acyuta, please take us away.
Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Jai. Nice to have you again, Acyuta. How are you?
Oh, so good. Way better, less tired.
That's right. Last episode, you just got back from Vrindavan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were half asleep the whole episode and somehow managed to share some wonderful insights and stay awake.
I remember
have something practical to say.
For the last 2 weeks, I've been like, I really hope that was all coherent. But you ever get that like internal fear? You're like too afraid to go back and watch it, but you really hope that it was coherent.
It was completely coherent.
Okay,
aside from your facial expression toward the end of the episode. And I don't know if anyone else would have noticed. I noticed because we interact a lot, so I could tell you were tired. Aside from that look of...
It really was. I was like, I don't know where I am.
This. Everything you said was wonderful. In fact, I had some nice feedback about the episode from a friend of mine, Veena, who's with us today. She's watching. Veena Sharma, so nice to see you. Hare Krishna.
Hey, hi Veena.
She sent me a personal message just showing some love and appreciation. Also, how you said you went to Vrindavan and you spent some time there, because Veena's currently considering going to Vrindavan as well. Veena, so that was nice.
You should go. And I'm doing a retreat September 25th to October 8th. We end in Vrindavan.
Oh, really?
I mean,
you should share that information in the chat or something.
Yeah, I definitely will. It's we're starting in Jaipur. So if any of you have ever wanted to experience me experiencing Govindadev of Jaipur, it's a big deal.
Govindadev in Jaipur, of course, because you're Ishtadev, with your local Krishna is Govindadev.
Yeah.
And you get to see the original Govindadev in his resplendent home palace of Jaipur.
Yeah, so we'll get to see. I mean, because there are so many. There's like hundreds of years of backstory for this Govindadev deity. Yeah. And so much war has happened, and devotees have they sacrificed their lives to keep this particular deity safe. Yes. So I think it's something that is monumental to be able to go and just have that darshan of him and be in the ambiance of the Jaipur temple. So we start in Jaipur and we go to Udaipur and Rishikesh, and then we head to Vrindavan.
Beautiful.
Really cool.
When is that?
September 25th to October 8th. It ends just on the first day of Kartik in Vrindavan.
No way. Very nice. Very cool. Okay. If you have any information, we can share it in the chat box. Maybe then people can access it. They can see it in the future as well.
Yeah, I'll get the link.
Okay. Amazing. So for today, we finished discussing text 10. So we went through a section of verses roughly from 4 to 10, which were discussing the different inconceivabilities of Krishna's nature, which was a really fantastic subject. And again, this was some feedback that came in from Veena. I had personally been struggling with certain inconceivable aspects to the nature of Krishna. In fact, I had been struggling with the exact next topic that we're about to speak about. And it's so interesting because I had been struggling with certain things that my logical mind was struggling to comprehend, which is essentially this idea that God descends to earth and manifests his pastimes here, comes to earth and enacts what you might call human-like pastimes. And so it makes sense. What they've just done, Krishna's a genius. I'm realizing as I'm speaking that he establishes his inconceivability and then says the inconceivable, he came, I'm here. But people don't appreciate that as truth. And my mind was struggling without having read this chapter recently. My mind was struggling with that. I'd fallen into that trap of, so hard to believe God walked the planet. It was the exact struggle I had. And now this is exactly how Krishna lays it out. I'm inconceivable. Firstly, just remember, and I came to earth and I walked the planet, I had human-like pastimes, and it's going to be inconceivable, but I just warned you about that.
Yeah, right? It is pretty genius. Now, if you don't mind me, diving deeper,
please, let's do it.
What about that was inspiring, the struggle? Because I guarantee you're probably not the only one. You're probably the spokesperson for thousands of devotees right now.
Yes. It was my logical mind saying, I've never seen anything that would allow me to believe that God was present on earth. I haven't seen anything spectacular. It's along the lines of, if I can't see it, it can't be true. What have I experienced? I've never experienced that to be true. And whenever anyone has claimed to be God, my experience has been they were a nut job. And what if that was the case back then too?
Yeah, and like you said, there are so many people claiming to be God, claiming to do this, that, or the other thing. And yes, with our logical minds, it is so, the notion, it's like hitting up against a brick wall almost, it's like this cannot be. My logical mind cannot make sense of this. And then I don't know if I told you recently, the Aurora Borealis, which is usually only seen in where Iceland and Canada.
Yes.
Right. So that, I guess, universal phenomenon, right? Whatever solar flare storm that causes them was so big that it pushed the Aurora Borealis down so far that you could see them in New York.
Wow. No way.
It was the trippiest experience of my entire life. Because I heard about it and then I read about it, and I had always wanted to see them, but I was not down for going to places that cold to be able to see them. And they said it was coming to New York and it would be kind of visible. And so we went out driving to go and try and find them. And we did. And when we did see them, the whole time I was just thinking this can't be. That's got to be something else, right? But it's impossible for it to be something else because the sky was turning green and purple and blue and red and fuchsia and magenta and pink and all of these unnatural colors. It was so interesting to see, weird in the best way, to look up in the sky and see the sky just playing with these colors. And the whole time I just kept thinking, I was like, this is not possible. Like, this has got to be a reflection of some other lights, right? But they were the same, visible all across all the boroughs of New York. And that's not possible. And so then, I'm sitting there thinking, and I'm like, but this is more than just weather. This is the universe. Like, I'm used to like weather storms. You get freaky tornadoes and things like that. You get things that happen with the weather. But this was something else. It was so much bigger than just my one tiny little planet. And it was one of those moments that made me realize that this universe has so much more going on in it than my brain can even fathom or comprehend.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking in that moment, I was like, see, this is Krishna's potency. This is Krishna.
Yeah.
Like the fact that the sky can turn an incredible rainbow of colors, more than you'd even see in the rainbow. And it's just, it looks so playful. It looked like some demigod was just having fun. Like, I'll just, play with the light switches this day. Just, it seems so whimsical. And then to think that this is nothing for the Supreme Person.
Yeah.
This is no effort at all. That was one of the moments that really helped me realize how wonderfully inconceivable our Lord is. And it also helped bolster my faith that, okay, I can have some faith in what God says now, because I can't explain this. I can't explain a solar flare making a planetary light show that I could see from New York that looked impossible.
It's funny. I just the other day was watching a clip from a Joe Rogan podcast where he was referencing a conversation that he had with Neil deGrasse Tyson, this, whatever you might call him. Was he a physicist, some kind of scientist who also has a deep knowledge of cosmology? And he was saying that recent science indicates that the universe is incomprehensible, that there are billions of universes, with each universe potentially having its own black hole within which there are billions more universes. So imagine billions times infinity, essentially. And that's the scope of the different universes that exist. It's completely mind-boggling. So even from a scientific perspective, they're able to somewhat understand the inconceivability of the universe within which we're placed. We're so small, actually. So small. And then we bring it down to my tiny, Prabhupada used to say it in such funny terminology. Sometimes this is reminding me when sometimes people would inquire from him, but they would do it possibly somewhat aggressively or with the intention of making him challenging him. He would say, what is your puny experience? This is puny.
Yeah.
We haven't experienced anything. So it's really, if you want to then bring logic in, you have to acknowledge, you can't say for a fact that can't be true. You have to accept that you don't know at the very least. And then to have so much more depth to everything that this philosophy brings allows me to then say, you know what, not only am I not in a place where I can say I don't know, but I can say I have faith. There's so much here that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And that answers these questions, even if they're difficult to understand.
Yeah, even for me, like just the other day, I was trying to explain an eclipse to my like 11-year-old daughter, who she already has like this scientific, like this mind that can expand and reach to the farthest reaches of. But, explaining this eclipse, it was another one of those moments where I'm like, this is more than just the weather. Like, it's more than just, clouds. And then they obscured the sun for a little. This is more than just the weather. Got like planets are moving and shadows and all this stuff, and things are all eclipsed and forget like the Vedic reasoning and that whole thing. Like it's so inconceivable. Whenever there's those moments where This is more than just the weather. Like somehow the weather I can understand and comprehend because it's been on our tiny scope. We've been dealing with it. But when it comes onto a planetary level, it's one of those things that makes me feel so small. Like you said, what is our puny experience? You know, Srila Prabhupada would also say, how can you understand this with your tiny brain? Like we have one small little brain. How are we supposed to really actively comprehend and understand the vastness of what science is saying now? There are at least as many universes as there are grains of sand on the entirety of the earth, not just one beach, but over the entirety of the earth, grains of sand.
Wow.
For me, I'm like, that's crazy. Like that's crazy. And like you said, each universe potentially with its own black hole, with millions of universes, with all these things, you start to feel a little bit like one time the Vedic creator of the planets and the worlds, Brahma, was a little bit confused, and he's seeing like, I thought I was the only Brahma. And they're like, no, no, you're the Brahma of your universe. There are way so many more other Brahmas, and they are way more powerful and vast than you can even imagine. And this Brahma's looking at his little experience thinking, I thought I was the most like powerful, like I was the star of this story. And now there's infinite numbers of other creators that are doing the same thing he's doing.
That actually helps. That helps me understand other things that I've heard about how the jiva enters the material, how the soul enters the material world, because it enters through the role of Brahma, and that's actually makes it more understandable. You understand there's, in a sense, unlimited Brahmas.
Yeah, and what's even more trippy is when you get into it and you realize that the name Brahma is actually the name of the post. It's not the name of the person. Right? So there are so many people who can become Brahma. There are so many people who can become Indra. Indra is the name of the post, not the person.
Yes.
And I think our current Indra, his name is Purandara or something like that. But like when you start to realize, you're like, oh snap, it's like the president or the prime minister, you know, like.
Right. It's a post. Yeah. So anyone can take the post. Yeah, that makes sense.
Only post that can't be taken is Lord Shiva's.
Yes.
He's his own, which is always very cool. So
Lord Shiva is one.
Yeah, he's so cool.
Wonderful. Shall we pick up then with text number 11?
Let's do it. So, text 11. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. Which is exactly what we were saying.
Yeah. It blows my mind because it's funny. It was only the last 3 months or so that my mind was really struggling with this concept, and just feels so relevant to be discussing in depth this section of the Gita as Krishna goes through it step by step, explaining it.
You know, just to real talk for a moment. I find it hard to even wrap my mind around like historic figures. Like you ever go to a museum and you're like, oh, this was like so-and-so's pen. Like this was the pen that George Washington used to sign the blah, 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 blah. You know, like I'm always like, wow, like that's interesting. Like I find it hard even just to wrap my mind around that. Like, this person 2, 3, 400 years ago did this and then saw this and was here and used this. And now we have it right here. That's kind of cool. Now we're talking about Krishna. There are trees that are 5,000 years old. And when you really think about that, you're like, wait a second, this tree might have actually witnessed these inconceivable things that I'm hearing about. How crazy is that? Like we have an inexplicable bridge between Sri Lanka and India that you can see from space. Like it's so, for me to wrap my mind around that. And with faith, my heart dives into it wholeheartedly. I'm there with the faith. And that's thinking from here. When I try and think from here, and then you get all the things that are like really, like you said, like we said, inexplicable. Like there's no way to scientifically explain this. You have to go with it. Go with it on faith. And this is exactly Krishna is saying, fools deride me when I descend in human form. And sometimes we do it with the aim to try and protect ourselves. It's easier to worship not a person because people have hurt us. People have been mean to us. People have been abusive toward us, oppressive. People have not cared about our feelings. So if God is a person with all of these personal attributes, one, what does that mean for me? Will God hurt me? And two, what does that mean for my relationship with God? Have I then hurt God? And then I have to take responsibility for that. So there's so much. I feel like sometimes we deride the supreme person and kind of detach the personality from the God aspect in order to protect ourselves, in order sometimes not to have to take responsibility for all the things.
Yeah, for sure. It ties into we place our experiences on this idea of God and think that can't be true. I don't want to accept that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how I love this text. I love this text because it so clearly illustrates the personal nature. Just very, very clear. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. We've spoken about this many times, but again, to me, it's a point to raise and discuss, which is that Krishna is the supreme person. Ishvara Parama Krishna. So he is the supreme controller. Who is that? Krishna. And this is coming from the Brahma Samhita, these beautiful texts. And then I just think about all the compilation of vast, detailed, and sometimes cryptic and complicated texts that exist purporting and explaining the divine nature of Krishna. Even the Mahabharata, the longest poem in the world, which is this incredible, beautiful, detailed, complicated poem detailing the story of Krishna, and not just Krishna, but also the Pandavas and the Kauravas, but explaining Krishna's divinity within which the Bhagavad Gita sits. And it's just, you think, my mind feels as though even that alone is evidence. The complexity of all of these things and how they all tie together and are trying to tell us something is evidence that even my logical mind should be okay accepting this to be true.
You know, it's really interesting, and I really like that point that you brought up about Mahabharata, because I'm going to tie it in.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of the personal aspect of God versus the impersonal aspect of God. And there are a lot of people who really, they gravitate much more to the impersonal aspect of God for whatever reason, even down to, we call God the universe. And we spoke about this in the previous chapter, right? How Srila Prabhupada says that at the beginning, you are encouraged to meditate on the universal form of the Supreme, right?
Yeah.
So they all have their places and they all have their purposes. But it is the personal aspect which tends to really fulfill the soul of a person. If we notice this impersonal aspect of even just the universe, or even agnostics, I know some things out there, but I don't know what, it doesn't stay fulfilling in the longest run. And life is a marathon. But throughout the marathon of life, I feel like it is the most personal aspect of God, which is the most fulfilling to the soul. And Vyasadeva, who wrote the Mahabharata, at the beginning, he actually does not include bhakti and Krishna bhakti so much. It's later his disciple Jaimini Rishi who then retells it and infuses it with all of this bhakti. And so the descendants of Parikshit Maharaj, who was one of the heroes at the end of the Mahabharata, but the descendants of Parikshit Maharaj wind up hearing Mahabharata from Jaimini Rishi and they like it better. Because Jaimini Rishi is all about how Krishna saves the day every moment, all the time. And Vyasadev's is more of a more objective, just kind of hands off, almost like news account. This is what happened. That's where I'm going to leave it. But we find that at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, if we look at it, Vyasadeva was unfulfilled. He wasn't happy. He was actually sort of depressed. He had like this whole writer's block. He had like a whole like spiritual block. And he's going through it and his guru comes and he says, well, you took all the personal bhakti out of everything. Of course you're not like fulfilled. And so we need that most personal aspect of Krishna. We need the personal aspect of God to fulfill us. There are times when I've seen people and they've prayed to the universe their whole, whatever. But when times really get rough, they start speaking personally. I know there's someone who's going to comfort me. I know there's someone who's going to be waiting to bless me, who will help me. It gets really personal really quickly. So I feel like that impersonal aspect, there's no reciprocation there that fulfills the soul. And in the second to last paragraph of this purport, Srila Prabhupada says, some of those who deride Krishna and who are infected with the Mayavadi philosophy quote the following verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam to prove that Krishna is just an ordinary man. Aham sarveshu bhuteshu bhutatma vastita sada. The Supreme is present in every living entity. We should better take note of this particular verse from the Vaishnavacharyas like Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, instead of following the interpretation of unauthorized persons who deride Krishna. Jiva Goswami, commenting on this verse, says that Krishna, in his plenary expansion, partial expansion, as Paramatma, is situated in the moving and the non-moving entities as the supersoul. So any neophyte devotee who simply gives his attention to the Archa Murti, the form of the Supreme Lord in the temple, and does not respect other living entities, is uselessly worshipping the form of the Lord in the temple. There are three kinds of devotees of the Lord, and the neophyte is in the lowest stage. The neophyte devotee gives more attention to the deity in the temple than to other devotees. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur warns that this sort of mentality should be corrected. A devotee should see that because Krishna is present in everyone's heart as Paramatma, everybody is the embodiment or the temple of the Supreme Lord. So as one offers respects to the temple of the Lord, he should similarly properly respect each and every body in which the Paramatma dwells. Everyone should therefore be given proper respect and should not be neglected.
Wow, what a beautiful verse.
Talk about a mic drop moment, right? Like,
wow. Wow, that's so beautiful. I'm so grateful that you highlighted that. So
it just
grateful that you
goes to
highlighted
show that, I feel like I had written a little reflection once and I was saying, maybe my greatest conversations with God were not the ones where I was just standing in a temple talking to the deity. Maybe the greatest conversations I had with God were the moments I've shared with people I love.
Very beautiful. Is that in your book?
It's going to be in the next one.
In the next one? Wow, so active. That's amazing. When is there a plan for when that might be released, or are you still in the makings?
I wish my procrastinating mind if I can corral it.
I hear you. I hear you. Wow, that's amazing. And that's very exciting. Very, very exciting. But it's a beautiful reflection, a beautiful prayer, and very clearly based on truth, as Prabhupada is saying here. And it's just such a beautiful truth. And I also really appreciate the way you talk about it, because sometimes this is human nature, my experience, that whenever there's differing opinions, it's very easy to come at it confrontationally. It's not just between personalists and impersonalists. I've seen it there, I hear about it there, but I'm realizing it's not just there. It's whenever there's differing opinions, people very easily, we can turn to confrontation. And the way you speak about it is so not with that mood. It's so with the mood of empathy, love, understanding, appreciation for the different approaches, for the different perspectives, mindsets, understandings. And that's very beautiful. I feel as though if more people took that approach, then you can't ever expect everyone to be the same, but at least we could have better loving relationships with each other despite our differences.
Yeah. I was just talking to one of our friends. I was talking Krishna Kishore.
Yeah.
And we were having a really, really nice conversation. And we were talking, it actually started with people talking about controversial things. Like, we weren't talking about controversial things. We were talking about the act of people talking about controversial things. And I was saying, but you know what? I was like, you know what I love? I love this. I was like, I love having the conversation where I can see the person. Because sometimes what's most controversial for the person is not even what's being said, but who's saying it. It's the look in their eyes. It's the, if I could see how it affected my friends, I wouldn't be so, we wouldn't be so quick to just say things on the internet. If I could see what the triggering comment or whatever, what it actually made my friend look like. And sometimes it's not even about the comment, but there's so much going on that we've detached ourselves from. And I feel as though in some ways social media has made us impersonalists, even though I think that was probably dormant way long before that. But it definitely did not help the situation. So we've become impersonalists in a real big way. And we say things, and the moment we say things, we don't even think about the fact that all of the power behind mantra comes from the sound vibration that we utter. All of the power that happens comes from our words. And so if we have more of these conversations, even on a Zoom call, right? It takes effort though. It takes much more effort to actively have that conversation and look at the person in the eye and then say it. And to take that stand. Because once you say it, you've really got to face their reaction. It takes so much more responsibility and work and accountability than just being able to mindlessly say something on the internet. And it goes the same for religion. The same for religion. It takes much more work to worship a personalized God than to just be able to acknowledge the impersonal one.
Yeah, wow. Nice comparison there. Nice realization, beautiful. Yeah, and I appreciate that you make that effort in both regards. You make that effort in both regards, and it's really very, very inspiring. Just take a moment to acknowledge a few people on YouTube: Hare Krishna Kumar Day, Hare Krishna Fact Armies, and Tanushri Raskar. Nice to see you all as well. Thank you for joining. Hare Krishna. I'll take the opportunity to say, if you're listening to what we're discussing and you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section on YouTube. We'll do our best to address those, to talk or answer those questions as well.
Some of them from India. It's late.
Yeah, they're staying up to listen to the podcast, which is amazing, which is wonderful. Okay, so that was such a beautiful beautiful, almost conclusion to text 11. I'm just looking at the last little section. The verse before that, there's a lot here addressing the difference between the impersonal and the personal, and obviously drilling home this, talking about and glorifying the personal aspect of the divine, this idea that Krishna is divine and that it's very easy to deride him, that it's very difficult for many people to appreciate his divinity. It goes into a little bit more detail about those things. That's there.
I I feel like it's always a good time to like point out a little bit of context. I feel like sometimes we can get like lost in the context, and I feel as though Srila Prabhupada speaks about this impersonal personal debate so much that you can kind of feel like, what is the big deal, Srila Prabhupada? Like, why do we keep going on about this? Like, we just keep going on and on and on. And every time we turn around, there's another verse talking about impersonalism versus personalism and this whole thing. It's even in his pranam mantra that we chanted. Like, there's such, there's such a whole right. Like, there's he's come to eradicate all of this impersonalism and voidism, and I'm like, what is the deal? But this was a big debate. It was a big debate, and when we start to realize that Vaishnav culture is so much bigger than the Hare Krishna movement, bigger than even just ISKCON, that there have been debates going back 500 years where people have had to like save Gaudiya Vaishnavism with their proper foundational understanding of Vedanta. And now Srila Prabhupada is coming to this unknown land, trying to give hundreds of years worth of Vedanta. And then to boot, there's somebody coming every day who's heard of some new sadhu, and they're saying, oh, Swamiji, what do you think about this person? And he's like, who? What do you think? And I've like read so many conversations, and it wasn't even like I was looking for them. They just kept popping up. He's having conversation about this sadhu and this sadhu and this sadhu and this sadhu. And he's like, who? It's like, just chant Hare Krishna. Like like at a certain point, you're trying to teach someone something and they're like, oh, but what about this period in history? And like, could we just focus? So I feel like Srila Prabhupada, he tries driving home this point that this personal aspect is going to be, it's going to be like the closest thing you can get to that experience of a divine revelation. And so I really feel like he's like, look, don't think that I'm not giving you the heart of my heart. Don't think I'm not giving you the most valuable thing that I have. Don't think that I'm even leaving anything out. And then also I feel like he's preparing everyone. This is what you're walking into. You're in the midst of a spiritual kind of like ongoing war that you know nothing about, but now you're here. Because the minute there are, philosophers who hear that you have this Vedic understanding, it's like all of a sudden, it's like the debate brain turns on. And so I feel like Srila Prabhupada is preparing anyone. He left all of these tools for ample preparation. You could prepare yourself for anything just by reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Anything and everything.
I also have understood that it's our nature. It's easier for us, like you said earlier, to see ourselves as God, or we're more inclined to do that. That's what most people, including myself, would rather believe, that we're all God. Actually, it's a nice thing to say. Actually, we're all God. We are. Yeah, you're God and I'm God. And there's some comfort in that, and it makes me feel like, oh, I'm special and all of this. And it's just so ingrained in our heart. That's how I've heard it as well, that there's a little atheist inside all of us.
Oh yeah.
That wants to be wants that role, that we are the center of attention, that actually all service should be aimed at us, that actually all good things should be given to me. I deserve the throne, etc., etc.
So, and that's
how,
and that's how we got here.
Yeah.
We got here because we wanted a place where we could be the supreme person. The problem was there was already a supreme person with the title. So then we had to do next best thing, and there actually did not exist a place for that. And so this place gets created, which is why I think it's also so difficult sometimes to understand how inconceivable Krishna is, because he was already the supreme person existing outside of this material manifestation. Now you've got this place, which is, it's a place for reform, right? It's like a detention center for rehabilitation of wayward souls. And you've got this place, and everybody keeps saying it's a jail, it's a jail, it's a prison, it's a prison. Durga actually means prison. One of the meanings, this is this place, she's the mistress of this prison, it's a prison. And then you want to say, wait, but God comes here? Why is God going to the prison? And then when he comes to the prison, he kind of he blends in. He's not like, I mean, sometimes he stands out, but most of the time she's just blending in. It's even said that for many, many of Krishna's pastimes, he did things that looked incredibly strong, but he would not change his form unless his friends and people were not looking. So as for like expanding or contracting or any of those things with his form, he wouldn't do it unless there was nobody around, or unless they were all like unconscious. So even we see the supreme person, you're like, and then he's going to blend in. Why in the world would you want to blend in with prisoners? Why? And the reason is to have relationships with all of us. We have that, those verses in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Paritranaya Sadhunam, right? Establishing the principles of religion, protecting devotees, annihilating irreligion, all of those things, killing demons, but all of those things happen in facilitating Krishna's having relationships with all of us. But yeah, there's that little atheist of my false ego who says, but I'm supposed to be God. I came here so I could figure out how to be God and enjoy my time as the supreme person. I feel like Krishna's always like, how's that working out for you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, wow. I love, you've got so many nice insights, Acyuta. So many nice insights. I love it so much. Shall we read the next verse?
Let's do it. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated.
Okay. So the first one, fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme lord of all that be. That's the previous one. The next one. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruits of activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. Okay. So those who don't accept Krishna as the supreme person, is what I'm understanding, the Lord of all that be, they don't see it like that. In that condition, everything that they're trying to achieve is ultimately defeated.
You know what? It brings to mind, you ever see somebody who's a vegetarian, but there's no real hardcore moral standing behind it? Like they have nowhere to anchor their intentions.
Yeah.
And then they're a vegetarian for 6 months, and then they go back, and then they're a vegetarian for 5 months, and then they go back, or they're it's wishy-washy.
Yeah.
And it has no concrete bearing. This is what I feel like is it happens in terms of our souls and spirituality. When we no longer have an anchor for our spiritual intentions, it's so easily defeated because it goes wherever the wind goes. It goes wherever there might be a really good argument. And there are really good arguments anywhere, everywhere.
Yeah, that's definitely that's a really good way to look at this. Deluded in their hope for liberation, and in their fruit of activities and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. It reminds me of myself a little bit with my desire to achieve certain things. When you're sharing this idea of vegetarians, I'm thinking, God, I actually fall into that category, not with vegetarianism because I have a strong anchor for that, possibly more with going to the gym. I am terrible at that. Or other activities. I am defeated in so many things that I'm trying to do, but I don't have a strong anchor for it. Perhaps that strong anchor is, it's a level of faith. When we talk about it in relation to Krishna, it's this certain level of faith, and I can see that in myself, that my faith is weak. It's not a very, it's there, it's strong in a certain way, in a certain sense. I'm speaking in a way which, the type of faith that gives a person deep conviction of action, that every day you're committed to doing certain things, no matter what, because you have such conviction. In that sense, there's a lack of faith. And it makes it very difficult for me to be very, very consistent. Although I would say that that's slightly different to the category of person that's being described here, because I would say that I do have some faith. I do have some inclination to accept what we're being told here.
Yeah. And, it's sometimes our faith comes from our experiences, and
Yeah.
that faith comes from the experiences of consequences. And so, even when you think about going to the gym, we just like the consequences are so gradual that we don't even see any of the we feel like we don't see the consequences of not going to the gym. If you went to the doctor and the doctor said, "Oh, good thing you came because we did your blood work and you're in danger of a heart attack if you do not walk those 2 miles every day."
Yeah.
With those consequences, it would bolster our faith, right? We'd have this faith that, okay, and this goes back to what we've been talking about so much. We're always putting our faith in someone or something. We're putting our faith in the doctor, that the doctor knows how to read the charts, and the doctor told me I'm gonna have a heart attack if I don't get my weight down and walk these 2 miles every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we look at these rewards that we want, like, what is it that we want? What are our desires? What are the rewards? What are the consequences? And we're always weighing it. So we are constantly putting our faith somewhere. Even if we decide we don't want to call it God, we're still then going to put it in something: science, universe, a person, politics, whatever it is, me, myself, whatever. We're going to place that faith somewhere. And then, depending upon the consequences and the reactions, we adjust our faith. We do different things. But yeah, I feel like spiritually, if we don't have that anchor,
Yeah.
highest bidder, our faith goes to the highest bidder. And
Yeah.
whoever has the argument at that moment. But
Yeah.
then we find that we can't stick with those habits because science and medicine is one way today and changes next month. I think we've all realized that. And when people start losing that faith in science and in medicine, and government and all this stuff, and then they start trying to figure out, they're like, the saying is, my life is a lie.
Mm.
It's like our mistake was putting our whole life and our whole existence, putting all that faith in fallible people.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you see the supreme person, we're like, no, that can't be real. I can't put my faith in that. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. Science is always changing. If you really think about it, there's no anchor to place your faith. You can place your faith in what we know today, but tomorrow that'll be different. And that's always the case because science is constantly growing. It's just the nature of it. It's constantly learning and growing. And it's never going to get to a point, where we can say we know everything. It's just the reality of the matter. So where do we choose to place our faith is a very, very important question. And why do we choose to place our faith there? When we ask those questions, which inevitably everyone will, consciously or unconsciously, these questions about life, and then we choose to believe certain answers. We're doing that based on faith, no matter what it is. So the question is, why are you placing your faith there?
Mm-hmm. And we should also do it with our spirituality. We should ask those hard-hitting questions about our material faith, but we should also ask those hard-hitting questions about our spiritual faith.
Mm-hmm.
You get this aspect of, okay, you go into a temple, you ring a bell or you knock, and then you bow down and you ever ask people why? Like, why are you doing that? A lot of the times it's like, well, my mom said. Like, it's, my family told me to when I was younger, and that it's
Right.
just what you do.
Yeah.
But actually, according to like the Pancharatra Pradeep, and you've got Archana Paddatis, and you've got all of these Vedic sciences of deity worship, they outline reasons for everything. There's nothing just haphazardly done. And then you go and you read through and you realize, oh, well, you ring a bell to clear out all negative energy and bring in auspiciousness, but also to announce yourself. Like, it's only polite. If you were to walk into a room with the president, you'd like knock, or somebody would announce you, or so you wouldn't just walk in. And so this is the supreme person, supposed to be like our supreme president. Of course you would announce yourself. Of course you would walk. Of course you would knock and bow. Like, then you're like, oh yeah, no, that makes total sense. Like, if you were going to go see the queen, like, you'd like, best behavior. You'd study up on etiquette for a long time to make sure there was not one misstep. And yet and still we walk into temples like, I'm here. I'm the star. Who's bowing to me? Like we walk in as though we own the place. So it's so interesting to see the arrogance that we come hardwired with. And
Mm.
it's so difficult to get rid of that arrogance. It takes a while, it takes a long time. And then still, it subtly sneaks back up on us. My Guru Maharaj always makes that reference to like Ravana. And Ram is shooting all of these arrows at Ravana's 10 heads, long story short. And they grow back. And so my spiritual master is always saying, is like, you ever have those moments where you think you've defeated that egoistic nature, that greedy nature, that lusty nature, that whatever nature, and then it sneaks back up on you. We have to make sure that these teachings are hitting heart deep. They're going into the right place in order for us to really conquer those lower natures of
Mm.
ourselves.
That's a really nice analogy. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Mm. Can we take a moment and have a look at some of this purport? Because I tell you why. This is one of those purports where some of Prabhupada's purports are difficult to understand, depending on what perspective you're coming from. I feel like this is one of them to a degree, because it almost comes across as quite heavy, pretty to the point, and there's no mincing words when it talks about a person who doesn't have faith in Krishna. That's what it seems to be saying to me. So it'd be nice to address that, perhaps get some context on that.
Let's get context and comfort,
Yeah. Because I'm thinking, if I'm reading it, I'm thinking, should we read this out or should we just skip over this? Let's go to the next verse. And I'm like, well, hold on a second.
Yeah, this is what this is for, to go through the hard stuff and see, like, maybe there's I don't know, maybe there's a realization. Let's see.
Exactly. What's the context? What's the understanding of this? Because we have a context of Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
And I come into anything I read from Srila Prabhupada, my context is, I know Srila Prabhupada is speaking from a place of love. I know Srila Prabhupada has come to share his heart with us with loving sentiment. So I have to understand it from that perspective, but maybe not everyone has that. So let's have a look and see what we can pull out of it.
Which is amazing. Just for a second, can we acknowledge, because that right there was faith. That right there is faith.
Right.
Madhva, you and I have not had the privilege of meeting Srila Prabhupada personally on the earthly, realm. Maybe dreams, whatever. But you and I have not had the great fortune of being able to sit and have a conversation with Srila Prabhupada. And yet you have such faith
Mm-hmm.
Even if it sounds coarse or it sounds rough or it sounds whatever, I know he's coming to share his heart, and I know he's coming from a place of love.
Mm-hmm.
That right there is anchored faith.
Yeah.
So give yourself a round of applause today, okay?
Yeah, I definitely I put myself out there a lot, saying I don't have this, I don't do that. So I appreciate that appreciation, and there for sure is some level of faith, and I just perhaps sometimes wish there was more.
Well, let's see, because even from the first line of this purport, there are many devotees who assume themselves to be in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, but at heart do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna as the absolute truth. Yikes. And I remember when you were talking about science, and you were saying that it's changing. And of course, science is us kind of running with a guess until somebody proves otherwise. And we just go with that guess. Also faith.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody ever says that, but that's faith. We're working with this guess until somebody proves otherwise. We're just going with it. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
But so, there are many devotees who assume themselves to be in Krishna consciousness, but at heart do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Also, the phone could ring at any moment. For them, the fruit of devotional service, going back to Godhead, will never be tasted. Oh, this is really harsh.
Yeah.
Similarly, those who are engaged in fruitive, pious activities and who are ultimately hoping to be liberated from this material entanglement will never be successful either. Let's see, let's read that again. Similarly, those who are engaged in fruitive, pious activities and who are ultimately hoping to be liberated from this material engagement will never be successful either, because they deride the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. In other words, persons who mock Krishna are to be understood to be demonic or atheistic. As described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, such demonic miscreants never surrender to Krishna. Therefore, their mental speculations to arrive at the absolute truth bring them to the false conclusion that the ordinary living entity and Krishna are one and the same. With such a false conviction, they think that the body of any human being is now simply covered by material nature, and that as soon as one is liberated from this material body, there is no difference between God and himself. This attempt to become one with Krishna will be baffled because of such delusion. I like that word, baffled. Such atheistic and demoniac cultivation of spiritual knowledge is always futile. That is the indication of this verse. For such persons, cultivation of the knowledge in the Vedic literature, like the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads, is always baffled. It is a great offense, therefore, to consider Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to be an ordinary man. Those who do so are certainly deluded because they cannot understand the eternal form of Krishna. One who considers the body of Krishna to be material should be driven out from all rituals and activities of the Shruti and the Smriti. And if one by chance sees his face, one should at once take a bath in the Ganges to rid himself of infection. People jeer at Krishna because they are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their destiny is certainly to take birth after birth in the species of atheistic and demoniac life. Perpetually, their real knowledge will remain under delusion, and gradually they will regress to the darkest region of creation. That is pretty hard-hitting. It's very heavy.
That's what I'm saying.
But also, I feel like there is some comfort there. I don't think that even if you've had a crisis of faith, there's a difference between having a crisis of faith and feeling like, I'm not sure if I believe all this, and mocking and jeering and deriding the Supreme Person.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a difference, right? There's a difference between someone who is questionable and someone who is antagonistic toward something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that what Srila Prabhupada is making here is this distinction there. And then what I love is that first line. He's like, you'll see devotees.
Yeah.
They worship, they do all the things, and they are not Krishna conscious. They are not on the same path.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is so key. Like the foresight of our spiritual grandfather to really say, in essence, devotees are still just people. Be careful. Still just people. Not everybody is an elevated soul, is what the distinction here that he's making. And not only do we have to be careful that not everybody is an elevated soul, but careful of that misunderstanding that, oh, I just have to get out of this material covering, and then I'll be set. Because that's how we got here in the first place, this yearning to be the supreme person. And if we keep hold of that misunderstanding, that as soon as I get free from this little bit of material hiccup that I have here, it's on. I mean, it's going to be full display of all the opulences. Okay? Like, we've got this. And I feel like Krishna's always like, you don't have anything. You've got nothing. We can't even control. Like, I got sick in India. I could control absolutely nothing. I realized I was not the controller of anything. Like, nothing will make you feel like that, like 24 hours of flu-like symptoms where you're like vomiting. You have no control over anything. You have nothing. You've got nothing. And that was caused by the heat. It wasn't even like I ate anything weird. It was just
Really?
heat. Yeah. And I
No
was drinking
way.
water, but my body was like, no. You didn't replenish the electrolytes. If one tiny thing is out of balance, everything goes out of whack. And yet we think we can be controllers of anything.
Gosh, it's so, yeah, it's so true. And when you put it like that, it highlights the absurdity of it.
It's delusional.
Mm.
Like this word that Srila Prabhupada keeps using, deluded, they'll be deluded. They are delusional. And that's what you, like, what you're saying. It's absurd to think that I could think, oh yeah. I'm in control. I'm supreme. I can even control my fate. I can't even control it if the government wants me to wear a mask. I've got no control over it. Ultimately, and not to, be like nihilistic about it, right? This is not for us to feel like doom and gloom, but just to really understand the reality of our position.
Right.
As, one of Srila Prabhupada's famous, like infinitesimal, tiny little living entities.
Right. Yeah, and it seems to me like the next verse it lightens that, because this verse does feel very, okay, bit more negative or doom and gloom, but then the next verse immediately starts to say, however.
And that's what I love about Krishna all throughout Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
Everybody watching, if you have time, and you all have time, okay? You've got time.
You got time. We know you do.
I know you do. Take a moment and just read through a chapter of the translations. Read it through, even if you want to, read it out loud. I mean, maybe not chapter 2 because that's a really long one, but even chapter 9, some of the shorter ones. And what I love about Krishna all throughout Bhagavad Gita is he's constantly assuring his best friend and his cousin brother, right? He says something that sounds really heavy. First, he starts out and he says something that sounds really outlandish and like, how am I supposed to understand this? And then he brings it more personalized, like, or it could just be as simple as accepting me as a supreme person. And then he'll say something really heavy, like fools deride me, and then they'll never be, they'll never be fulfilled, and all of their results will be baffled. And I feel like what's happening now is like Arjuna's giving him the look like, wait, what? Because we've shared jokes, like I've joked about you. Arjuna, there are points where Arjuna has said, he's like, there was a Brahmin whose children died and he couldn't get them back. And so he goes to the king and he's like shouting, and Arjuna walks out and the Brahmin says, what makes you think that I can put my faith and my trust in you, Arjuna? when I've asked Krishna and Balaram and Krishna's son Pradyumna and Krishna's grandson Aniruddha, and none of them could help me. And Arjuna has the gall to say, he's like, well, I am Arjuna, wielder of the Gandiva, right? I am the great bowman. I'm not Krishna. I'm not Balaram. I'm not Pradyumna or Aniruddha. I'm Arjuna, and there's only one of me, and I will get your children back. So I know all of this is running through his mind when Krishna's like, fools deride me when I appear in human form. And Arjuna's like, yeah. But bro, what about me?
Yeah.
Where do I fall into this? And then Krishna he's always giving him assurances. There's so many times. And then he's like, however, don't worry. The ones who haven't, they're under my divine protection. So he's simultaneously giving this jab to his friend and then also smiling at him. Like, he's like he's like, remember that time? And then Arjuna's like freaking out. It's like, don't worry, I was just kidding. It's fine. Like, he's like, don't worry. You're on the right side. Don't worry. You're fine.
Yeah. There's a lot of that, isn't there? It's swings.
Mm-hmm.
This is really hard, but it's really easy. This is impossible. It's completely possible. This is out of this world, but it's also completely tangible.
Right. He's like, you're never going to make it, but you, my friend, will absolutely make it.
Yeah, exactly. To me, when I hear this, it's also, to me, this is a sign of the beauty of mercy. I often pick up on that vibe when we discuss these verses, that I get this idea that actually the reality is, on my strength alone, I ain't gonna make it. But Krishna's making a point to try and make sure that I'm not working on my strength alone, so that I do make it.
Yeah.
And there's these contrasts constantly being made, that if it was just you alone, you lost, boy. But you're not alone. And like that. And there's moments where I've definitely experienced moments where you really feel that, you really appreciate that Krishna's desperately trying to help us. And all we really have to do is allow that to happen. So, and it's very beautiful when you connect with that, when you actually do experience that, or you connect with that reality. It's very beautiful, very encouraging, and it very faith-giving.
I like how you said that too. Desperately trying. Like my supreme friend is desperately trying to help me. All I have to do is let it happen. Yeah. And I'm still fighting it. Like, I'm still fighting it.
I'm just fighting it. Exactly. I'm like, no, please.
Right?
Leave me here a bit longer.
But constantly I'm always like, oh no, get me out, get me out. And then he's like,
okay,
I'll get you out. And I'm like, wait, leave me here. He's like,
yeah. So perhaps because I'm aware of my own time as well today, I'm flying to America in 2 days. I have a lot to do prior to that. So I'm aware of that. And I'm thinking, should we pick up from 9:13 next time?
Yeah, we can pick up from the hope-giving passage.
Yeah, exactly. So we spent a little time addressing the previous one, and I'm hoping that we'll also be able to get more context, because we sometimes see this where Prabhupada speaks what you might consider very harshly, very directly. And this is one thing that I've learned that my parents have always trained me to do, is don't always take a book for its cover.
Yeah.
Don't judge a book by its cover. Try to understand what's the context and what's the meaning. And often there are words that Prabhupada would say that had different context to how we assume them for what we assume them to be now. And things like demonic, for example, is a fantastic example of that. What does that mean? So perhaps as we go into some of these future verses, we'll get a little more context and all of that as well.
Definitely. I'm excited for it.
Thank you. Firstly, Acyuta, always a pleasure speaking to you. Always a pleasure. You never fail to, I would say, impress me with the amount of insights and knowledge and your depth of reading and the memory that you have for so many wonderful things about Krishna and verses and like that. So thank you. And thank you to our dear listeners as well. We've had quite a few comments come in the comment section today, which has been very sweet. A lot of prayer hands and hearts and flowers. It's very lovely to have had you all with us. And looking forward to continuing to dive into the Bhagavad Gita with you in 2 weeks' time. We'll be back in 2 weeks again on a Wednesday evening. I look forward to that. Until then, I hope you all have